At the time after we give out the t-shirts. Maria's been to, there are 11 summer institutes. She's been to all but one, so that would make it 11. If you were here when I told you there were 12, you'll understand that. So all but one of the summer institutes, and she always has wonderfully provocative things to say, and so I'm looking forward to hearing this talk. So Maria, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Alihan said that he comes with half-baked papers. I come with just the ingredients. So there is.
You said that the ones you present here will go somewhere.
I published everything that I presented here. With no exceptions, really. Usually, I have most of the things that I presented here come from an idea that I have at the Liberty Fund conference. I presented here as an ingredient list of a paper, then eventually it becomes a job paper and it is published. So fingers crossed for this one as well. This is a little bit more sketchy than the others. Yeah. Yesterday we were talking about high starting cost or high entry cost when you start something new. Well, this is a new territory for me. The astronomical part is new. What I would like to claim is that astronomy may somehow have affected the way in which Adam Smith thought about morality, and in particular, the way in which he developed the theory of moral sentiments. This is not particularly a new point, because some people have seen the role of Newton in Adam Smith, both in Wealth of Nations as well as in theory of moral sentiments. But I would like to extend the influence of astronomy not just to Newton, but to Copernicus. And the inspiration to this comes from Fontenelle. Conversational regularity awards, as I will talk about in a second. And this is the Liberty Fund fault, because I went to a Liberty Fund conference where we read Fontenelle. And it was a time in which I was thinking about distance and Smith, and I was struck by some similarities. And this is how, when I started to think of the possibility of some influence of some of the studies of astronomy in his moral thinking. Adam Smith was educated in astronomy, in the sense that he was well read in astronomy. It was one of his favorite subjects when he was in school. And he seems to have developed this interest in his school years, and then he was in Oxford. And to have written a juvenile essay, as he calls it, the history of astronomy during those years. And so there is some strong evidence that he has knowledge of astronomy. The role of astronomy has been pointed out before, mostly through Newton, in the sense that Smith admires Newton explicitly in the history of astronomy, because he claims that his system is beautiful because it's simple. There is one principle that basically is used to explain the universe, gravitation. And so it was relatively common from what I understand, in the 18th century to try to replicate the Newtonian system also in moral systems. So one way in which Smith has been seen was to be the Newtonian of the moral system. Moral system in a broad sense, not just literally moral sentiments, but also economics, which was part of moral sciences. And the role of Newton in Wealth of Nations, as I said, has been pointed out because it does mention a couple of times gravitation and the fact that the prices in markets are able to basically keep together the whole system, the whole universe of society. So there are some parallels already pointed out, as well as the theory of moral sentiments, the gravitational force that we see in astronomy can be seen in moral sentiments through the role of sympathy. So sympathy plays the force of gravity that we observe in the skies. And I have nothing against that view. I just want to add to that, maybe. I'm trying to see if it's possible to add to that view. The way in which I approach it is through Fontenelle. Why Fontenelle? Well, because that was the only thing that I read about astronomy besides the history of astronomy. Fontenelle wrote before Newton, like 1 year before Newton. He was a very well-known novelist, so he's not an astronomer, he's a popularizer. So technically he's not a scientist, just like Adam Smith is not a scientist, a popularizer in the history of astronomy. Adam Smith owns the collected works of Fontenelle, and he cites them a couple of times in footnotes, mostly in reference to Newton, but nevertheless there is proof that not only he owned the books but also he read them. And I said, when I read it, probably because of what I was thinking at the time, I saw some parallels that to me were striking. So this book, Conversations on the Plurality of Words, is a conversation between a philosopher and a marquise. And the philosopher explains to the marquise the system of the skies during a series of conversations at night in the gardens. And the marquise comes with basically no knowledge about the skies, and at the end of the book, at the end of the conversations, she claims, oh, so now I'm a philosopher as well, because now she understood the systems. And so why, in a sense, should we care about if there are parallels between Fontenelle and Smith's theory of moral sentiments? Well, because I think, well, if there is indeed some, if there are indeed some parallels between Fontenelle and Smith, or some influences of the study of astronomy on theory of moral sentiments, then we have, in a sense, a different way of using natural sciences and social sciences. Yesterday we had a presentation where we saw some origins of economics, or some of the influences of economics from other disciplines, like natural disciplines, like physics. In the 18th century, there may have been still those kind of influences, but in a slightly more flexible way. Even though there are studies that I recently read where they claim a stronger link between astronomy and economics, meaning that astronomy is one of the founders, intellectual foundations of economics, in the sense that astronomers were economists. Kepler and Newton both worked at the mint, both dealt with money. And the method of studying the sky, measurement, precise measurement, and from the precise measurement extract an abstract system, was then adopted also by economics. So there are many parallels that can be seen between astronomy and moral sciences. I'm sorry, it was not Kepler, but it was Copernicus and Newton that dealt with the mint, as well as with the skies. And another reason why I think that this is has the potential of being a relatively interesting project is because it shows the importance of cross-fertilization between disciplines. So a discipline that closes in itself may be very, very fruitful, but nevertheless it can be more fruitful if it's able to interact with other disciplines. So specialization is useful only when there is trade. And in this case, Smith can give us an example of the importance of trade among these disciplines because of the interaction that we have with other disciplines. And is, for a more personal note, is yet another way to see the wealth of Smith's intellectual status. So here's what struck me in reading Fontenelle. This is one of the sections in which the philosopher described the skies, who explains the skies to the Iraqis. He, Copernicus, did well, I answered, the philosopher is talking, to have put down the vanity of men who had given themselves the greatest place in the universe, and I'm pleased to see the Earth pushed back into the crowd of planets. Surely you don't believe, she cried, that the vanity of men extends all the way to astronomy. Do you think you've humbled me by telling me the Earth moves around the sun? I swear to you, I don't have that self-esteem. Good Lord, no, madame, I said. I know fully well that people are less jealous of their place in the universe than the drawing room. And the ranking of the planets will never be as important as that of two ambassadors. However, the same desire which makes a courtier want to have the most honorable place in a ceremony makes a philosopher want to place himself at the center of a world system if he can. He's sure that everything is made for him, and unconsciously accepts that principle which flatters him, and his heart will bend a matter of pure speculation to self-interest. This, to me, was like, whoa, I've heard this before. And I've heard this before because the vanity of the philosopher is a recurrent theme at the Summer Institute. But also the fact that the vanity of men who had given themselves the greatest place in the universe. And then what happens? So the Ptolemaic system places the Earth at the center of the universe. And once Copernicus comes out and says, no, the Earth is at the center of the universe, Earth is pushed back into the crowd of planets. Adam Smith has a very, very similar description of how we develop moral sentiments. We are born thinking that we are the center of the universe because of our self-love makes us think that we are the center of the world. And then what happens? When we are pushed back into the crowds, when we are in a social context, we realize that we are not the center of the universe. So the parallel between being the Earth at the center of the universe and me at the center of the universe, and the fact that we have, the fact that have on humanity are parallel. And when we are pushed out of the center, we're just one in the crowd, the vanity has to tone down. And then he goes on, Fontenelle, and says, so what makes the moon shed light on us is that it's a firm, solid body which reflects its pulse to us. Now I know you want to agree that the Earth has the same firmness and solidity. Appreciate then what it means to be advantageously placed. Because the moon is far away from us. We see her only as a luminous body and forget that she's a great mass like the Earth. And the reverse. Because the Earth has a misfortune of being seen from too close. It seems to us to be nothing but a great mass. It's only to furnish pasture and animals, as we don't perceive that it shines since we can't place ourselves at a distance from it. It happens the same way then, said Marquise, as when we densify stations higher than our own. And we don't see that in essence they are very much the same. It is the same thing, I answer. We want to judge everything, and we're always at a bad vantage point. We want to judge ourselves, we are too close. We want to judge others, we are too far away. If one could be between Earth and the moon, what would be the proper place to see them then? I'm sorry, that. Sorry. If one could.
You come too close, maybe.
I come too close. Here? If one could be between the Earth and the Moon, that would be the proper place to see them well. One should simply be a spectator of the world, not an inhabitant. Again, this first scholar Smith, especially somebody who worked on distance and the role of the moralizing role of distance in Smith, is a little bit like, I heard this before. And indeed, this is what Smith says. Smith tells us that I can form a just comparison between those great objects and the little objects around me in no other way than by transporting myself, at least in fancy, to a different station, from whence I can survey both at nearly equal distance, and thereby form some judgment of their real proportions. In the same manner, to the selfish and original passion of human nature, the loss and the gain of very small interest of our own appears to be vastly more importance, excite a much more passionate joy or sorrow, a much more ardent desire or aversion than the greatest concern of another, with whom we have no particular connection. His interest, as long as they are surveyed from this station, can never be put into the balance of our own, can never restrain us from doing whatever may tend to promote our own, how ruinous soever, to him. Before we can make any proper comparison of those opposite interests, we must change our position. We must view them neither from our neither from our own place, nor yet from his, neither with our own eyes, nor yet with his, but from the place and with the eye of a third person, who has no particular connection with either, who judges with impartiality between us. So, again, this is not too different from what Fontenelle is describing. So the way in which we put the Earth at the center of the universe parallels the way in which we put ourselves at the center of the universe because of our self-love. And the way in which instead we get to a more correct system, solar system, a better understanding of the solar system is by changing place and by looking at planets from neither station, neither from the moon, nor from the Earth. And one has to be the spectators, has to be equidistant from both in order to be able to see that both of them are rotating. And this is exactly what Smith is saying in the case of moral development. In order to be able to give, or to judge correctly ourselves and others, we have to be neither on one place nor on the other. We have to be at a distance from both positions. So this is, to me, what was striking in the parallels, and what made me think there may be more in astronomy that influenced Smith than gravitation. Sympathy would do the trick, right? Because sympathy is indeed the gravitation. Sympathy is what allows you to see the other, to put yourself outside. And indeed, the way through which Fontenelle describes this becoming a spectator is through the imagination. So he flies to the moon with the Marquise, and he flies into space with the Marquise. How? Through the imagination. And so he explicitly, the word imagination is throughout the book. It says, with our imagination, we go here, we go there, we see all the different people that live on the moon and live on the other planets. So the imagination that works in order to understand the solar system is indeed the similar imagination that works for sympathy. So the gravitation, I have no complaint in saying that sympathy is gravitation. Sympathy is the gravitation of the moral system. But the gravitation has to keep together a system that is not a polymeric system, but is a Copernican system. from Fontenelle struck me. All these planets, said Marquis, are like us, blaming the other for what we ourselves do. The Earth says, it's not I who turn, it's the sun. The Moon says, it's not I who sway, it's the Earth. There are a lot of errors everywhere. So, again, this is something that sounds familiar to somebody who's accustomed to read clear moral sentiments, because Smith says the same. Smith says, what do we do? Well, we blame others for our faults, because we love ourselves too much to admit that we did something wrong. And so we always find excuses to justify our behavior before this is pre-moral development. Moral development that help us to get out of that problem, which is a problem, it's self-deceit, that is a fatal weakness of mankind, which is a source of half the disorder of human life. That is what it says. So again, the parallels that I see, I don't know if I'm making them up, which is possible. I'm reading too much into Fontenelle, which is also possible, but nevertheless, there's something here that to me is to digest. Fontenelle again says, and the most natural and ordinary movement, I answered, are those which give the least sensation. And that's true in morality. The working of self-love is so natural in us that usually we don't even sense it and believe we are acting on other principles. This is Fontenelle is describing how the Earth rotates, and Marquis is worried. He's like, well, I don't feel like rotating, like I'm not turning. And he said, well, yeah, you don't need to feel like you're turning, just like you don't need to feel that your actions are motivated by self-interest. Nevertheless, we are turning, and nevertheless, your actions are motivated by self-interest. Here there are, so this bit, so far, what I've seen are the parallels between theory of moral sentiments and the conversations and regularity of words. And then I'm like, okay, let me see. Because like there are so many other things in Fontenelle that strike like sort of familiar. And so I went and reread History of Astronomy to see why I was so familiar with certain things that came out of Fontenelle. And the role of imagination, as I already mentioned. But also Fontenelle is emphasizing very strongly that the solar system or the system in the skies are a product of the imagination. Just like Adam Smith does. So systems are a product of our imagination. There's like a minor point which I'm not ready to tackle here simply because I'm too ignorant to know how relevant it is. So I acknowledge that it's present, but I'm not going to look at it. Which is the fact that philosophy is a consequence of leisure. Both Smith and Fontenelle presented. I don't know whether it's a common theme. I don't know if it's something that was like it comes from antiquity and it just brought throughout the two. But the other thing that I think are interesting are how both Fontenelle and Smith motivate search, philosophy. How, which, as I'm going to show, is basically out of curiosity, and as Fontenelle says, of course, hindsight. The hidden chain, as we'll see in Smith. How there are parallels on the fact that beauty is more important than utility in motivating the philosophers. And both of them present nature as an opera house to be looked at. And both of them claim that beauty consists in simplicity. These are both talking about the system of the skies. So it's not like beauty in the sense of Craig's before, like passion beauty. This is the beauty of an intellectual system. So here's what Fontenelle says about why philosophers do what they do. All I told her is based on two things only: curiosity and poor eyesight. If you had better eyesight, you could see perfectly well whether or not the stars are solar systems. And if you were less curious, you wouldn't care about them, which amounts to the same thing. The trouble is,
It's a distance.
I'm not right from this side.
No, it's not a matter of distance. You shouldn't speak in front of him. Always give the back or stay behind him.
Okay, I'm here. I'm on the other side.
I used to.
So the trouble is that we want to know more than we see, than we can see. Again, if we could really see things as they are, we would really know something. But we see things other than they are. So true philosophers spend a lifetime not believing what they do see and theorizing on what they don't see. And if this is not something that is going to be here, but if you, David did some work on this, on when Smith says it is commonly believed, it is commonly seen, usually it means it's wrong. What you see is not what actually is. So the division of labor, just to mention the easiest example, Smith says the best place to where you actually experience division of labor is in a shipyard. But we think it is in a pin factory. Why? Because we can see it. It's wrong. So philosophers don't believe what they see, right? And they theorize on what they don't see. And this is what Smith says. Wonder, that uncertainty and anxious curiosity excite by similar appearances. So curiosity, wonder is one of the motivations for studying astronomy, or for studying in general, that motivates philosophers. So it's curiosity that generates wonder, and wonder generates study. So mankind in the first ages, these are just like two examples of the many where Smith mentions curiosity as motivation in the history of astronomy. And what does curiosity push us to do? To look for the hidden chains. Again, the chains that we cannot see. So the poor eyesight comes back again. Fontenelle tells us, our folly is to believe that all nature, without exception, is destined for our use. And when our own inquirers of the philosophers, what is the use of the Prometheus number of fixed stars, when a fraction would accomplish the same thing, they answer coldly that they serve to please our sight. So pleasure is and not utility, is one of the aspects of the universe. And what does Smith say? Wonder, therefore, and not any expectation of advantage from these discoveries, is the first principle which prompts mankind to the study of philosophy. That science which pretends to lay open the concealed connection that unite the various appearances of nature, and they pursue this study for its own sake as an original pleasure or good in itself, without regarding the tendency to procure the means of many other pleasures. So again, why do we study philosophy? Because of the pleasure of looking at the sky, not because it's useful. The philosophers are motivated in the same way, both in Fontenelle and in Smith. Again, another parallel. I have always thought that nature is very much like an opera house. From where you are in the opera, you do not see the stages exactly as they are. They are arranged to give the most pleasing effect from a distance. The wheels and counterweights that make everything more, I guess I missed a word there, are hidden out of sight. You do not worry either about how they work. Only some engineer in the pit, perhaps, may be struck by some extraordinary effects and be determined to figure out himself how this was done. The engineer. And then Smith, in the history of astronomy, says, of wonder. Upon the clear discovery of connecting chain of intermediate events, it's vanished altogether, wonder. But the obstructive movement of the imagination is removed. Who wonders at the machinery of an opera house? Who has once been admitted behind the scenes? So again, here you have a philosopher who's able to see, like the engineer, what goes behind the opera house, the machinery of the opera house. And here is some of the parallels that shows that both of them think that the beauty of a system is in simplicity. Nature has become very mechanical. I hold it. Is it? Hold, yeah, sorry, spelling mistake. I hold it in much higher regard now that I know it's like a watch. It's superb, that wonderful as it is, the whole order of nature is based upon such simple things. And Smith describes a section of different solar systems, or the explanation for solar systems in terms of simplicity. The first systems were very complicated. How many wheels are necessary to carry on the movement of this imaginary machine, the system of eccentric spheres? And then this very complicated system is replaced by the simpler system. And then by an even more simpler system. And there's a progression of simplicity until we reach to Newton, which has the simplest one. There are no wheels, no complicated machines, no complicated systems, they're just gravitation. So, what I would like to be able to claim is that the study that Smith had, the study of astronomy that Smith engaged himself with, was a major influence on his thinking, not just methodologically. It's like the history of astronomy has been seen as a methodological approach, how to deal with the science or with the philosophical inquiries. But also as a direct way to get into his theory of moral sentiments, because of the ability that, or the history of astronomy shows how we change place, and by this changing of the place allows us to have a better understanding of the universe. Exactly like by changing of the place in among humans, through the imagination, through sympathy, allows us to get a better understanding of human morality. Thank you. Can I ask the first question?
Should I hold the mic? Okay, what's this one? Does anyone know?
Thank you.
Nothing. There's a big surprise. First question.
Second.
First things first, yes, of course.
Second, less important.
It is interesting. I just can agree with you that you see the parallels between Fontenelle and Smith. But the interesting thing is that what you show us of Fontenelle, there's a parallel with another text, which is not coming from Copernicus, but it's all about Copernicus, and that is Galileo's Dialogues of the World Systems. And if you read that, that is exactly the same kind of understanding of taking position and thinking in different kind of positions, so kind of relativism, but also thinking about seeing, and then you have to discuss about the telescope. So I think Fontenelle probably is, you have to say it, but probably he had read Galileo's Dialogues and is that bringing in to explain that to the Marquise, something like that.
Right. I am completely ignorant about astronomy in general, and in particular, I'm ignorant about astronomy in the 18th century, or anything that came before. The only knowledge I have is the history of astronomy and Fontenelle. And the only thing I know about Fontenelle is that he was a popularizer, he's not a scientist. Most likely he has read some popularization of Galileo, so that's a very useful reference.
Just read it, yes.
And I know that Smith did read Galileo directly. So.
Other questions? Yeah.
Well, I've got a suggestion for a quick publication in Hope. And in a sense, when I worked on some of this stuff, it was just bark, right? And so you've got another paper. I want to leave you screwed it up again.
No. It's
no. We're thinking publication.
No, I know, but this is not screwing up. Because you've screwed up many places, but not the Barclay part. But this would actually be an integration of it. Because like it's explicitly citing Berkeley, it doesn't cite Galileo, for example, as another that's even less. Because like Smith that did work with the original astronomers. So this collection of works are with the originals. But this wouldn't contradict the clear vision. I think would just integrate it. Because it's not just the learning how to distance yourself from a position, but actually putting yourself outside the center of the universe. So thinking that you are the center of the universe and then saying, no, I'm pushed back into the crowd. That, I think, is the humbleness that the impartial spectator gives you, which is the humbleness that Fontenelle describes or the lack of humbleness that Fontenelle describes when he claims that vanity of the philosopher is what puts himself in the center of the universe.
It's the lack of vanity of the philosopher in Bark,
right,
which is really interesting in the context of this.
But I see this not as in contradiction with Berkeley or not in contradiction with the Newtonian part. I think that both of them are present, which makes, again, the argument of the interdisciplinarity stronger, because it's not just one particular field of natural sciences affected, but it's the whole complex of natural sciences that actually were brought into the moral sciences in one way.
This is a very interesting discovery. Since Liberty Fund is to blank for it, I'm obliged to sort of push you a little bit on it. And that is the following way. So you can see these parallels. So the question is, does it have, from the standpoint of kind of the predictive power or the accuracy of it, does it help Smith or does it not help Smith? I mean, that seems to be a very good question. So Smith read Fontenelle and possibly was influenced by it. The question is it right? So in other words, what do we know about? Is it a way of thinking about it that it makes Smith a better determinant of nature? Can we extend this notion that there's a relationship between the natural and the philosophical, sort of something? And sort of what are the relationships? Does it help in the accuracy, or is this just a finding that says, look, he read this, but in fact it doesn't give us additional leverage over and saying Smith is right about certain things regarding human nature and the way we regard others and the regardedness? Does it help us with predictive powers?
No, I don't know, because I am not sure how much I want to say Smith is right, Smith is wrong, in general. And in this, this is not the work on distance. My work on distance is particularly, I don't know whether I want to say Smith is right or wrong. I'm just describing what to me seems what Smith is saying. In this case, this is probably the most embarrassing presentation I've ever had, because I know nothing about astronomy. And I'm really not comfortable in saying Smith builds on Fontenelle simply because the only thing I know is that he owned a copy of it. So sort of like the influence is in quotation. I think that more than Fontenelle himself, probably the Copernican system with the Newtonian system affected Smith. And I just happen to have read Fontenelle that has similar passages, and apparently Galileo also has similar passages, so it would make Fontenelle in a sense less relevant, but the Newtonian the Copernican approach much stronger. So as far as whether it's right or not, I don't know. I like to think it's right, but I'm not a philosopher, so I actually have not just from within your field, but also from other fields as well, if you're willing to listen. And if you're willing to adopt what you from other fields in a non-mechanical way, which is, in a sense, part of the criticism that yesterday Marcelo was saying, like if you just bring something and implant it in a different discipline, you risk to get to a dead end eventually. But if you instead are much more flexible in the way in which you approach a different discipline to try to bring benefit to yours, then you have fruitful results like theoretical sentiments. I may be completely off on this.
You are telling us that maybe Smith's moral universe can or may function like a Copernican system, right? So in that period, any philosopher dealt with astronomy in a certain sense. The difference between a Copernican system and a Ptolemaic system is not so much, it's not so huge, because they are both systems that imply a center. So the universe is finite, and we need a center in order to understand something. So the center for Ptolemaic system is Earth, the center for Copernican system is the star, our sun. But there are so many other positions. For example, Tycho Brahe claimed that the Earth, the center of the universe is Earth. The moon is going around the Earth. The sun is going around the Earth, and the other planets are going around the sun, and something like that. So sort of centered systems. But there are so many other systems that are in which we don't need a center, like Giordano Bruno, for example. So the infinity is universe. This is, in a certain sense, a step forward in your direction. We don't need a center, so we can, in a certain sense, better understand other people, because we are not only we are not the center, but that center doesn't exist at all. And so maybe you can check also this possibility. Okay?
Giordano Bruno said. Fundamentally, it's interesting in this because he describes the variety of words in the sense that it's not just one system, but he mentioned they travel into other systems. This is different from Copernicus. I know, but this is when I'm focused on the Copernican systems because this is how he describes the Copernican system. But he does mention the possibility of flying to other systems that are not just the solar system. So they fly first within the solar system and then they take off and fly into other systems as well. But what I think is interesting for me is this point. The fact that you're willing to abandon your current position and see yourself detached from it. And you're not going to another place, you're not going just on the moon. You have, in order to see that both the moon and the sun, both the moon and the earth rotate, you have to be a spectator of the world, not an inhabitant. But I think that to me was the key, the key parallel to Smith.
This is just a reaction to your talk. You use interdisciplinarity several times, and I am committed very much to interdisciplinarity. But the one time that I have served on a committee with an astrophysicist, he was a person with whom I had least in common. So these guys were taking it's very clear, you established it very nicely, their insights. Adam Smith was taking his insights from the astronomical system, whatever type. Then what happened when suddenly there must be a time when it was no longer relevant. So did astronomy advance suddenly too much, or what happened? So in terms of this question was going in my mind. So then I think, but this then shows the importance of the utilitarian, the significance of the utilitarian calculus. Because then they depart totally from all of this and get to almost an accounting register without this. And so it's just a comment. that perhaps this will allow us to appreciate the fundamental move that Bentham was making.
As I mentioned before, there are claims that astronomy is one of the foundations of economics because of measurement, the emphasis of measurement. So that's the accounting part is actually what is emphasized in the eventual split.
But not what you emphasize.
No, not what I said.
Yeah,
No.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed. Very good.
Yes, I want to come back to several, also because of several things being said. So it is not about taking one system to the other one and say that's the system we should look at. I think that is the reason I referred to Galileo, because there's a dialogue. So it's really it was at that time not clear what the system was. So they were discussing these things and so they were. So that is one thing. So that makes it interesting. You don't need to say, okay, it is a matter of being wrong or right, and it's really thinking about these different systems, and it has to do with center, where the center is. But so just that's I think that is the discussion they were involved with. So that in that sense, Galileo. I think that's the way they read Galileo. The other thing is that the interesting thing is the imagination. Galileo is very well known for what we now today call the thought experiment. So thinking about imagining position, imagining worlds, and so reasoning from that. He became famous for that. So even with respect to that, it is interesting to bring this in. And the last thing, just the thing I would like to say, no science is a unified science, so you always have different views which are being discussed, whether natural science or social science.
Maybe.
Just one second, otherwise I'll forget. No, thank you. I will try to look into Galileo. I'm kind of scared of the action of the movie. But both the fact that this dialogue, I think, is very important. Because in a sense, Fontenelle is a dialogue, but it's not a real dialogue. He is a philosopher who talks to the Marquise, but the Marquise doesn't know anything. So she just expresses, like, oh, what are you talking about? There are people on the moon? How is that possible? Why are they men? No, men means otherwise they wouldn't work. Because there was like major issues. Like he somehow escaped censorship because this book apparently was controversial at this time. But nevertheless, it's not a real dialogue with opposing views. It's more like when I'm telling you something. So the fact that Galileo is a real dialogue is probably even a better example because of the exchange. Exactly. The exchange. Yeah. And if also Galileo uses imagination, that's marvelous because the imagination is a key player in theorem of sentiments. So that would be terrific. Thank you.
My comment is connected with his comment because imagination in Galileo plays the role of hypothesis. You can imagine, so that is taking some hypothesis and not other. And then another thing from Galileo, it is not so much important the center of the universe, but the position of the other bodies and how they are able to keep the same position and have a cyclical movement, regular cyclical movement. Okay.
The maintenance of cyclical movement or the regularity, it's possible through gravity, which is the rule of sympathy. So that's not what I'm interested in here, because there are other people that work work already on the Newtonian aspect of it. And they focus on Newton because that's what Smith focuses on.
Yeah, I got my points I suppose falls from this discussion that's developed. I learned a great deal from that. I find it very interesting because I'd never really considered Fontenelle in relation to Smith, and now. I think you've made a. I think you've made a case enough that there are certainly similarities. I think though the problem that you might have to face is in saying that this stuff comes directly from Fontenelle. Is that some of the themes you're touching on are stuff that you see anticipations of in Hutchison. And I think that maybe one of the things that's quite interesting is to see if you just out of interest to see what kind of things would have been involved in the natural philosophy class at Glasgow at the time, because he would have taken that class. Simpson, I think, taught it, and if Simpson was teaching and was using Fontenelle as a way to teach, then that would suggest that it was already in there in addition to the Newtonianism that Hume and all that were interested in at the time. So what I found interesting about this, what came out of the discussion here, which hadn't really occurred to me, was that you've been talking about thought experiments, essentially, that Fontenelle's suggesting here, and that Galileo beforehand was suggesting. That's very different from the Newtonian method. And the Newtonian method is the one that, as you're right to say, that's what people have been focusing on in the relationship to Smith. What you've pointed out, I think, in this paper is that that's not Newtonian at all, the thought experiment, and that's very interesting because a lot of people that have been working on Smith in this connection have taken him as following Hume's program as it's laid out at the beginning of the treatise. So, yeah, no, I think this is very interesting. I think it can go in even more interesting directions. Let's say that.
Can you tell me more about the Newtonian thing? It's a measurement, right, for Newtonian? As opposed to Newton doesn't use mental experiments because he relies on mathematics and on measurements.
It's observational rather than imaginative.
Right.
So it's hypothesis on the what's happening, or what seems to be coming out of the discussion here is the idea that Fontenelle's in a tradition is very different from that. It's the idea that thought experiments can carry forward without Newton.
Right, because in history of astronomy, Smith does focus on the importance of measurement to generate a better system, to understand the system in a better way. So once you have a collection of measurements that contradict the system that you have, then you start to rethink what the system is. And Newton was able to generate his system because of the perfection of his measurement. And this is explicit in Smith, in history of astronomy. But then right before Newton. So the conversation on the Dark Reports was published the year before Newton Principia. But now doesn't have any measurement. It doesn't mention measurement at all in his novel like this. It is literally just like, let's fly with the imagination and see the people that live on the planets.
Yeah, but from what you're saying, that means this is methodologically.
Indeed. And that I don't know how Copernicus dealt with. Did he use mental experiments on top of measurement? Does anybody know?
Maybe Leibniz. Leibniz, I think, but as I remember, but
Leibniz is not mentioned by Smith.
But because it was Leibniz
well known, everyone.
But then also Christian Huygens is closer to this. So that's the only thing. There's a lot of.
Yes.
But you were right about that's definitely not Newton. That is what we're clear about. But for that, you can see. But it's more what I tried to say. It's much more to see what the discussions were and what kind of direction they were. That they were different from the discussion that Newton would like to have.
Is it available somewhere, as far as you know, the content of the course? Because Smith did take courses both in mathematics and astronomy. It was.
I'm not sure what there is on that, but there would be. I think there's papers, lots of papers are still around or published. So there might be something in that.
Yeah. And from what I understood, I said this is quite a known territory for me, that Smith was a great admirer of Simmons. He really liked his course and did very well, right?
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? I think we're ready to watch soccer for 15 minutes.